Welcome to the Stratford IP Strategy Academy. In this session, we're going to learn about why intellectual property, or IP, is important. Let's get started. Intellectual property is an intangible asset. An intangible asset is a resource that has no physical presence and has long-term value for a business. Intangible assets can be applied to concrete items. Let's use the example of the Saucony Convera running shoe. Saucony sells a tangible product, a running shoe, but this is supported by their IP, which while intangible, increases the value of the Saucony company beyond the revenue from the sale of the shoe. Their IP is manifested in numerous intangible ways. The brand recognition they get with their trademarked names, the look of the product with industrial designs, technical innovations to improve the utility of their shoe, improved manufacturing processes kept as trade secrets, and copyrighted marketing material for selling the shoe. IP is one of the most valuable intangible assets of a company, and as we can see from this graph, the valuation of large companies is now primarily centered around their intangible assets. 95% of investment decision makers in Columbia Threadneedle's investment survey agreed that intangible assets contain important information on the future strength of a company's business model, and 88% agreed that conventional valuation methods were inadequate if they were not considering intangible assets. Now let's focus on leveraging value in intellectual property rights from the perspective of increasing competitive advantage and defending and protecting. Intellectual property supports the ability to grow and expand your market. In the Canadian Intellectual Property Office's 2019 IP Canada report, they showed this increased ability was realized both domestically and internationally. They also found that SMEs holding IP were more likely to expect and have experienced high growth. In the 2014 survey, SMEs holding IP were 1.5 times and 2 times more likely to have experienced and expected high growth in the past 3 years than SMEs not using IP, while in 2017 the figures increased to 1.9 and 2.5 respectively. Investors want to invest in a disruptive business with IP protected in a pragmatic and efficient manner. Without protection, developments and competitive advantage are free to be used by all. If the IP is well protected and it can succeed against better financed and more experienced competitors, it has an exponentially higher chance of achieving a great return on investment. IP strategy is therefore a key factor considered by investors when evaluating a company. According to the study from SIPO, companies who are aware of or own IP obtain a higher financing amount than companies that don't. The importance of having a comprehensive IP strategy is visible in how investors provide equity financing. Investors provide more financing to companies that comprehensively use IP than companies who only hold formal IP. They get 4 times the amount of financing compared to only 1.4. Moving on to supporting revenue generation, along with increasing revenue directly by selling protected products, IP can also create revenue through licensing and royalties. For example, Samsung paid Microsoft more than $1 billion in the second year of their agreement, and that amount grows and is dependent on the number of Android phones sold. Having IP and marking it appropriately creates marketing and brand equity. It showcases technical leadership both with customers and competitors. For example, marking the patent number on the Dutch oven is a way to promote that it is an innovative product that has been recognized by the patent office who issued a patent. Marking products and product documentation with patent pending is also an indication that there are innovative concepts that are in the process of being protected. Marking trademarks and copyright is also important to show brand ownership. Moving on, we will now discuss the defending and protecting aspects that come from holding IP rights. IP creates a competitive advantage by increasing the barriers to entry for competitors. By obtaining IP rights, you can exclude competitors from using your innovations. If they do not comply and infringe, remedies can be taken up in court. For example, Canadian company i4i won against tech titan Microsoft Corp. After the U.S. Supreme Court upheld a judgment that Microsoft willfully infringed and had to pay $290 million. It's not only patents where companies go to court, for example, copyright as well. A jury ordered SAP to pay Oracle $1.3 billion as the acquired company Tomorrow Now had previously and illegally downloaded proprietary software and documents through a web scraper. This further reinforces that when it comes to intellectual property, whenever there is an acquisition, companies take on everything, including IP risk. IP can also be used to defend against threats. For example, by having the ability to countersue with your patents that might be infringed, or by invalidating the patent in suit with your own IP. Also, IP assets can be cross-licensed to prevent future threats. For example, Microsoft and Funai Electric announced a patent cross-licensing agreement covering a range of consumer audio-video products. This cross-licensing agreement is another example of the advantages of an IP-led economy, encouraging product interoperability and accelerating research and development advances across companies. Having clear policies and strategies for IP creates increased transparency and awareness with competitors and employees surrounding the company's IP. The last example we're going to discuss today is trade secret theft. Back in 2006, two former Coca-Cola executive assistants were sentenced to 5 and 8 years in prison for conspiring to sell product samples and other confidential information to Pepsi for as much as $1.5 million. Pepsi informed Coca-Cola, who then contacted the FBI, and an undercover operation led to the arrest. As can be seen in the World Intellectual Property Organization's 2019 Facts and Figures, global IP filing activity continues to grow at a rapid pace, with new records reached in 2018. Although intangible, IP is important because it creates a competitive advantage, it supports you in defending and protecting your position, and it increases your company valuation. Investors want to invest in a disruptive business with IP protected in a pragmatic and efficient manner. My name is Miriam Davidson. I hope you enjoyed learning about the importance of intellectual property. You can test your knowledge by taking the short quiz and further your IP strategy learning by watching other videos available in the Academy.